This ESPN podcast is brought to you by Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. Visit geico.com.
Coming up on the Best of the Paul Finebaum Show podcast is Texas A&M, the new power program in Texas. We go to Baton Rouge for an update on Lyle Collins and ask if Les Miles' hot seat is beginning to boil. Plus your phone calls. It's the Best of the Finebaum Show podcast, and it starts right now.
This is the Best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Hey, very pleasant good afternoon on a Wednesday. John, let me bring you in here quickly because you've been watching this thing all day on social networking. Would it be a fair statement to say that the University of Texas fans do not have much of a sense of humor?
No, they're not happy, to say the least. We tweeted out earlier that Texas A&M is the new power program in the state of Texas, and that's based over the last 5 years. Look what's happening at Kyle Field now, Paul. Going to be one of the best stadiums in college football. They have a Heisman Trophy winner. Granted, they haven't won anything, but based on those Nielsen ratings the last couple days that came out, both in Houston, Texas A&M fans are taking over that city, and that same trend as well happening in Dallas. So listen, the writing's on the wall.
Yeah, I mean, we may be dense sometimes or appear that way, but we do realize TCU and Baylor are going to be preseason top 25, but they are great programs. I wouldn't yet classify them as power brokers in that state. They may, national championship could certainly turn that around. We're talking about the battle for power, the battle for money, the battle for influence, and that's really where A&M is right now, and I think they are the IT program. We talk in terms of the UT A&M battle, not so much who has the best team coming back. Everyone in America knows TCU is a serious national championship contender. A&M is not, at least not yet.
Well, just because you're a national championship contender doesn't mean you're a power program.
No.
I mean, we're talking about teams with a lot of money, with deep pockets that can influence decision-making in the sport of college football. You saw what happened at TCU last year, Paul. TCU got left out of the college football playoff, large in part because they're not a power program, and Ohio State was.
No, that's exactly right. And that is our point, and that's why we said what we did. No big deal. And TCU fans and Baylor fans, both of them or both of you want to get upset. That's great. We'll worry about it some other time.
This is the Best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Let's bring in our next guest, Matt Moscona from ESPN Baton Rouge. The Lyle Collins story has been one of the most perplexing stories going, and certainly Matt is down there. And Matt, always good to catch up. First of all, thanks for the time, and good afternoon. What's going on?
Paul, it's always my pleasure. Wish today it was under better circumstances considering all that's gone on with Lyle in the past week, but it is always good to chat with you.
Yeah, let's before we get to the meat on the bones, let's talk about the mood in that community because I've heard from people down there, and I want to hear from you as well about his reputation and really the concern for him. I mean, we all understand what happened. No one is making light of that or making less of it, but how is he viewed down there?
Paul, something that I think that's important to remember is Lyle's a Baton Rouge guy. He prepped at Redemptorist High, just 10 minutes from LSU's campus. So people in this community have known of Lyle and the type of athlete he is, and they've seen him publicly in some form or fashion since he was a sophomore in high school. So Lyle has always carried himself with a lot of class. He is a thoughtful, dignified young person. I think his decision to come back to school for his senior year showed a lot of maturity to get his degree. Paul, I've said many times over the past week that if through the course of this investigation something comes out that Lyle Collins had any degree of involvement in a double homicide, 12 years working in Baton Rouge, there will not have been a greater shock to me than if Lyle Collins was involved. That's the type of person he is largely believed to be from everyone who's seen him and covered him from the time he was in high school.
Okay, now that we've established that, and certainly I think that is an important part of the story, on the other side, in terms of the actual facts of the matter, what do we know?
Well, there was a report, believe it or not, from TMZ, and leave it to TMZ to start to get to some of the bottom of the alibi, but that Lyle was down in New Orleans at a Pelicans game when the Pelicans were playing the Warriors in the playoffs. And Lyle was down there with family and friends the night of the murder. Everyone I've spoken to over the last 8 days, Paul, I haven't spoke to one person that believes that Lyle Collins pulled the trigger. I believe his alibi to be rock solid. I don't think there's any doubt. I think where there are some questions that come in is when investigators, and yeah, Paul, I'm sure you can understand why I'm treading very carefully, just the sensitive nature of the story. Mm-hmm. The investigators are naturally going to look at motive, and if it comes out that it was, in fact, Lyle Collins' child, you can start to piece some things together where you can ask logical, progressive questions. Why, when Lyle learned of the shooting, didn't he come provided it's his unborn child, why didn't he come right back to Baton Rouge? Why did he put off speaking to investigators? My personal feeling is he got a lot of bad advice from his agent, from his attorneys, and that was from the very onset of the situation. But you can understand logically why investigators would want to speak to him. Now, that should not and does not presume any type of involvement or guilt, but I think it's understandable why they would want to speak to him.
So, at this point in time, and that's all we can really deal with, Matt, what's your best guess on the facts of the case as authorities are sharing them, and what's the next move?
The real tough part about guessing is, especially when you're talking about a double homicide, it's something that is really, really tough and almost impossible to do. I'm most surprised that more than a week has passed since Brittany Mills was murdered, and that publicly there have been no suspects named or mentioned. That's not to say that Baton Rouge police don't have other suspects in mind, but Paul, Baton Rouge is a big country town. People talk, and it's not always impossible to get information. And the fact that we haven't heard any other names or potential suspects or leads is a bit curious, I'll say. If you want to ask just my feeling is that Lyle Collins did not have anything to do with this. Like I said at the beginning, just knowing him the way I feel like I have, I'd be stunned if there was any involvement. And my hope is that investigators are able to follow leads, ultimately bring the shooter, the murderer, to justice, and that Lyle Collins, if in fact he had zero involvement, can continue on with what is now a delayed football career. But I think everyone also, in the way you set it up, Paul, I thought was apropos, understanding that a delayed football career pales in comparison to finding someone who shot and killed a pregnant woman, ultimately leading to the death of her unborn child as well.
There's been a lot of noise, of course, Matt, about NFL clubs being interested. Is it a fair statement to say that they will wait until there's a total and definitive statement on this?
Well, something that some of the scuttlebutt that I've heard is that it was roundly understood that the NFL, whether they whispered it to teams or made a directive, was strongly encouraging teams not to pick Lyle Collins for the sake of defending the shield, as we hear so often said. You can understand why, in the light of very publicized cases. Aaron Hernandez, Ray Rice, the list, Greg Hardy, people know the names. I don't think that if that was a directive or that was a consensus among teams that prevented them from drafting Lyle Collins, I don't think an hour-long meeting with police in Baton Rouge erases all of that. I think if and when a suspect is arrested and Lyle Collins is his name is completely cleared, I think at that point you might see him sign a contract. That has not stopped nearly every team in the NFL from contacting Lyle about his interest. There was a report in the Advocate here in Baton Rouge that, as a matter of fact, Lyle and his agent have started informing teams which will be on a list of teams that he would consider signing with. But the suitors will be plenty. Obviously, he's a first-round talent. He's going to come on the cheap for the first 2 years of his career, provided he's allowed to continue.
Matt, moving away from that, and it's not easy to do, but the football season is closing in. You've seen the same projections, whatever they matter, which is actually nothing, or very little. But no one's picking LSU to win the SEC. Frankly, no one's picking LSU to really even be a serious contender. Most have them in the teens in terms of the top 25, behind Alabama or behind Auburn, certainly behind both. How is that playing? And if this season doesn't turn dramatically, where does the noise and conversation go about both Cam Cameron and Les Miles?
Well, I think it's a make or break point, Paul. And you asked what's been the reaction to sort of the prognosticators. I don't think anybody has any issue with it because it's right on. It's a team that finished the season unranked. 1-85, LSU's got as much talent as anybody in the country. They've got big linemen. They've got fast guys in the secondary. They've got talent. They just don't have a proven quarterback. And if you don't have someone who can direct the offense, you're going to have the same problems you had a year ago. What's really going to be interesting, Paul, is, and to your question and your point, since the 2011 season where LSU was undefeated and 8-0 in the SEC, in consecutive years they've gone 6-2, 5-3, 4-4. That's a trend. And if LSU ends up with 4 losses in the SEC again this year, and divisional losses to Alabama, Auburn, Mississippi State, Arkansas, like a season ago, Paul, it's my feeling, I don't know how Les Miles survives that. For all the good he's done and the fact that he's still under contract through 2019, another 5-loss season and that continuing downward trend for 4 straight years. I don't know how there's not some serious soul searching within that building and they begin to look at in another direction.
Well said. Won't be the last time we talk about this. Matt, many thanks. Talk soon.
Always a pleasure, Paul. Thanks.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
We talked a little bit yesterday about a Nielsen report about how Houston had advanced in terms of being an A&M town. It's always been a pretty good A&M town, but many have interpreted this as a major fall from grace for the University of Texas. No better person to talk to than Kirk Bowles from the Austin American-Statesman. Kirk, I hope the spring has been good. Can't wait to dive in here with the upcoming college football season. And for your sake, I hope it's better in Austin.
It's great here. Sun's out. The rain's left from yesterday, and we're one day closer to football season.
Let's. I want to get your reaction from the Capitol about some of the hullabaloo over A&M moving in. I mean, I know this is an old debate, and it will probably never end, long past both of our lives. But what's your sense on, since A&M entered the SEC, what has been accomplished in terms of making a run at Texas in terms of the state of Texas?
Oh, I think it's meant a great deal, Paul. I think Sumlin's made great inroads in the recruiting of the state of Texas after DeLoss Dodds, the former AD, once said that A&M's got a tiny sliver in East Texas. I think they've expanded those boundaries significantly, and as much as anything besides just kind of the presence that they've had in the state, the fact that they're part of the best conference in the country, the fact that maybe they haven't won even a division, but, you know, you have to say they've held their own and been respectable. And the last thing is that right now you would have to say A&M's been the better program, you know, since they left for the SEC. So I think it's pretty much been all good for A&M.
And contemporaneous to that, Kirk, you have TCU and Baylor making enormous noise, and that's from within the UT foothold. What impact other than the fact that they were ranked in the top 10 last year, and TCU seems to be the favorite of many to make the 4-team playoff again this year. What impact does that have on Texas?
Well, I think you add it all up, and this is what you get, Paul. Texas is probably the fourth best program in the state. If you want to say that, Houston's, benefited and they've come on. I mean, probably the best hire in the offseason, Tom Herman, the Ohio State offensive coordinator. Texas Tech's been down. They're trying to find their feet after, the Tuberville and now, Kingsbury hasn't produced very much. So, you would have to say Texas has slipped to fourth at best, and everybody's still waiting for signs that when they're going to get back up. And, the battle cry is kind of, when is Texas going to be Texas again? And honestly, Paul, I don't know if anybody really knows the answer to that yet.
Well, and you know this better than I do. I heard this in Alabama during the Mike DeBose and Mike Shula and Mike Price years, even though Price was only there for a spring game. But when you talk about how the program was down, people would say, yeah, but it's Alabama. And I'm hearing a lot of that. The program at Texas isn't to that degree, but you can't will your way back by saying, hey, we're Texas. And that comes to the next point about Charlie Strong. He has said some of the right things and has done some good things, but what's the feeling in terms of where he is taking this program?
Well, the old cliche, the proof's in the pudding, and they're still waiting for dessert, here in Austin. And I don't know if it's coming real soon. Charlie, like you said, he's done some good things, Paul. I think he's created an attitude and fostered an environment here where entitlement isn't going to get it. He and defense coordinator Vance Bedford have even said after that stinker of a bowl game against Arkansas that Texas doesn't mean anything to the recruits in Texas anymore. And those are pretty damning words. And he's right, though. I mean, until you start, producing back on the field like Texas is supposed to, kids are going to look, at all the SEC schools. They're going to look at Florida State, Notre Dame, Southern Cal, places like that. It's almost like you have to reestablish yourself every couple of years because it changes so fast. I mean, the fact that we're sitting here in 2015 in May, Paul, talking about TCU and Baylor be the powers. I mean, how do you think that says with, Longhorn Nation, people that grew up thinking, well, Baylor wins the title about once every 50 years. And instead of a half century, they won 2 in a row, or at least a share of it 2 in a row. So it's a drastic change. And, Texas would like to think, well, we're rebuilding, we're getting back to Texas, it won't take long. People are wondering how long it's going to take. And I wrote a column this spring, Paul, where the problem with last year is that, last year wasn't the rebuilding year. This one is more rebuilding, except he's almost starting from scratch. When you look at his roster, Paul, and he lost his best 2 wide receivers, he lost his best running back, lost his best defensive tackle, a first rounder, his best defensive end, his 2 best linebackers, his 2 best defensive backs. So what's there to build on? So you had a 6-7 season. You had a top 10 recruiting class that is very impressive, and I think we'll see a lot of them on the field right now. But there's nothing other than Texas DNA that would suggest, well, Texas is going to be back and it's going to happen as early as this fall.
You can blame a lot of things on Mack Brown and the administration, but at what point, and I'm assuming the answer is pretty soon, if not now, but at what point is this Charlie Strong's responsibility?
Well, how much time do you give somebody? I mean, do you give them Turner Gill 2-year Kansas time? I don't think so. And the fact that, Texas hired a black coach in football and basketball for the first time in their history, says a lot. And I think they would really be taking steps backward in the African-American community if they were not giving Charlie ample time, reasonable amount of time to turn this around. So, and some people will say, well, look at Texas. Max last year, they were playing for the Big 12 championship against Baylor in the finale. You win that, you go to the Fiesta Bowl, and you're in a BCS Bowl. Well, that's true, but they lost a lot of their best players there, and they still don't have a quarterback. We can't ever get away from that in any conversation about Texas football. But, I don't think he's anywhere near the hot seat yet. I think that'd be disingenuous to say. But in 3 years, when you're going into the 4th year, you better be coming off a 9 or 10 win season and be poised to be a contender for the college football playoff, in my opinion, Paul.
Kirk, you know the terrain, you know the schedule. If you had to make a guess on how UT ends up this year, where would you go?
You know, they look like the same 6-6 team that I saw last year, you know, through the end of the regular season. I just don't see enough playmakers, enough players that can make an immediate and big-time impact on the field. You know, the spring game was very unimpressive. The quarterback situation is very unsettled. Gerard Hurd was the freshman. He came off of 2 back-to-back 4A state championships and was redshirted last year. And to me, he looked better than Tyrone Swoops in the spring game. And the fact that Gerard Hurd was doing it against the number 1 defense, to me, gave him a leg up. Tyrone Swoops just had 12 starts and went 5-7 in those starts. And he had like 13 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, and 2 horrible games in the season finale against TCU and the bowl game against Arkansas. So, you know, they got to get that position fixed. We all know how important that is. And they have to have more playmakers. I would think the goal for Charlie is to get to 6 or 7 wins, maybe 8 if you just coach the hell out of them, stay healthy and get some breaks, and then get to a bowl game and win that to create some momentum for 2016. I wish I'd be more rosy.
Well, no, it's okay. I mean,
Kicker looked good.
One thing I do like about you so much, Kirk, and there aren't many left. People that live in close proximity to the power base, but aren't afraid to give an honest opinion, and that's what you always do, and that's why you have lasted and prospered. Prosper might be a debatable word in your business, but you survived.
That's true. It's all about survival, and, you know, what's the point in sugarcoating it? Fans aren't stupid. You know that well as anybody with your fan-driven show, so they know what they're seeing out there, and I don't think you can fool them. And, you know, I can spend 10 minutes talking about how Nick Rhodes, the kicker, made 4 or 5 field goals, and all of them were 40 yards or more, but I don't think that's going to sell too many tickets for next year.
No. Well, Kirk, it's always a pleasure. We enjoyed the time, and see you soon, I hope.
Okay. Thank you, Paul.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Geico presents Strange Saving Stories. Astronomers detected an interstellar transmission. It stated, Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more. The implications were staggering. Was the cosmos telling us we could all save hundreds on car insurance with Geico? Or did their radar merely pick up a signal from the nearby Rufus and Clyde's morning show? We may never know.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Daryl is next. What's up, Daryl?
What's going on, Paul?
Doing good.
First of all, I mean, you and I both, I knew that Charlie Strong wasn't the man for the Texas job. You know what? Texas' run of dominating college football is not just over, it's been over, okay, for a long, long, long time, and they will never get back there again. Not dominating will not happen. Will not happen. Charlie Strong, they couldn't even find a good coach. Charlie Strong, you know, he wasn't their first selection. I don't know how far he was down the list, but they bullied college football for long enough. I think people got tired of it. I say that's why A&M dumped on them and left and came to the SEC. I think it had a lot to do with it. I love it. I mean, because they were just bullies forever. You know they were. They would never, all they can live off of it is their past. They would never get back to where they dominate college football again. I do not believe it. Now, as long as the SEC is around, and I don't see the SEC going anywhere anytime soon. Now, I want to address the little loudmouth down in Florida who wants to come in here and attack Mark Richt, okay? He fails to point out, okay, that in Mark Richt's 14 years at Georgia's finished in the division either first or second 10 times, all right? He fails to point out that since Mark Richt has arrived at Georgia, he's turned the series on Tennessee. He's turned the series on Florida, okay, where we used to just get killed. He's completely dominated Georgia Tech in the state. He fails to point any of that out. Let me ask you this, Paul. If Mark Richt would have been available when they fired Muschamp, do you think Florida would have hired Mark Richt?
No.
You do not?
You talking about recently?
if Mark Richt would have been available when Muschamp got fired, do you think Florida would have hired him as a head coach? I think Mark Richt could leave.
By the way, he was available. They could have hired if they wanted.
I
just don't think that. I don't think that was a possibility because of the rivalry.
Well, it was just a hypothetical situation. I just think Mark Richt could probably.
I think a better question is Mark Richt a better coach than the person they hired? And I think we both know the answer to that.
Absolutely. And I'm gonna tell you one. This is right here is what I don't get. There's something, fans do not get, there's something bigger than winning a college football game. You sit there and say whatever you want. There's a reason Mark Richt and Bob Stoops were the two coaches that all the other coaches chose that they would want their kid to play for if they couldn't play for them. And here's the deal. Less than 5% of college football players are good enough to play in the NFL. So there's got to be something more important than winning. And it is. It's turning kids, young kids into good men. Mark Richt excels at that. Something Urban Meyer did not excel at Florida. Now I got to ask you something, okay? I saw in Phil Steele's poll, Paul, that we have nine SEC teams in the top 25, Paul. Where is the gap closing at? I mean, they're closing the gap on the SEC, but I'm at 9.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Jim is up next.
You know, Paul, you gonna crack on me like that? You gonna let the guy crack on me, and you gonna go along with it?
Jim, have you ever heard of like satire?
No, that's not satire. You've been doing that crap for about 7 or 8, 9 years, Paul. Just making up crap. You're the one that instigated that stuff, saying, tell me when I ever said I was the greatest anything.
Jim, if I say it, then you'll accuse me.
I've never said it, Paul. That's a lie. If you say I said it, it's a lie.
I am never going to reference it again. How about that?
Well, I don't care. That's the point. The point is, Paul.
Because you don't have a sense of humor.
What? That's not.
Sometimes you just have to laugh at yourself.
Well, I don't laugh at myself. Why should I laugh at myself? You're the one that should laugh at yourself, Paul. You've been preempted today by a stinking softball game. You can't even get on TV anymore. They don't even put you on the other alternate channels, and you're telling me. I mean, you gonna crack on me, man?
Jim,
you better crack on the show, Paul. The show is what sucks. I don't lie.
I agree. You're right.
You let these people come on here.
Jim, this is probably the Jim. You're right. We're probably.
I'm right.
We're done.
Exactly right.
This show is about to be canceled. You know that.
I don't care. It might be after I stop, which I'm doing now. Bye.
Come on. There's one thing you called him the greatest stuff. The greatest what? Page 15?
Yeah. Let me say this about you, Jim, and I'll say it to anyone who wants to listen. I said what I did. I said it tongue in cheek. I didn't say it like, "Hey, this is an absolute fact." And if you don't want to have a sense of humor, then that is really your problem. I can only do so much. I was joking. Everyone knew I was joking. It wasn't even meant to be serious. So if you want to be personal and you want to be petty, then be personal or be petty. I just got through saying I'm not going to ever reference it again because, frankly, it clearly doesn't. You don't find any humor in it, and I'm not going to repeat what I just got through saying I wouldn't repeat. But you know, and the audience knows where it came from. We won't replay it again, but John, it's pretty well known where the Ted Williams reference originated. Not from me.
It's called being one of the guys. I mean, if you're going to go hang out with the guys at the bar, what are you going to do? You're going to rag on each other. You shouldn't expect to take everything personal. This wouldn't be a radio show and one of the best smack talk radio shows in the country if we couldn't poke at each other a little bit. And I guess Jim doesn't want to partake.
Yeah, I mean, I like the guy. I mean, he's fine. I've been criticized more for defending him than for criticizing him, but I can't. It's not really worth the effort anymore, Jim. I mean, with all due respect, I can't defend you every day. I can't be your babysitter. I can't be your daddy. I've got to do the show for all the people, not just you. I've done the show for you for about 10 years, and look where it's got me.
Let's put it into perspective. We were literally talking about Jim being one of the horses in the Triple Crown.
Yeah, I mean, I thought. Of all the shots that I've taken at Jim, I thought that was probably the lamest.
Down the stretch they come. It's Jim and Secretariat. The Secretariat got him by a nose.
I mean, sometimes you just have to be able to laugh at yourself. And if I made a strong case, hey, Jim said he was better than Ted Williams, then am I pushing the envelope a little bit? Although I remember, but I mean, if you can't even just laugh at the fact that we had you in the Kentucky Derby, then you truly have no sense of humor. You are humorless, Jim. You just probably shouldn't listen anymore.
It was my fault, by the way. Definitely too young to be in the race with Secretariat. I think more of Smarty Jones.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. I certainly don't want Jim to be considered elderly, other than the fact that he originally claimed he met Rocky Marciano, who died in 1969. I mean, we don't make this stuff up. We react to real live events. Andy is up next in Ohio.
Paul, I've been listening here and there. There hasn't been that much going on, but we've all got to call in and celebrate every time Jim from Tuscaloosa quits again. Yay! And since you don't want to say it, I'll say it. Jim from Tuscaloosa claimed to be a better baseball player than Ted Williams on your show, and it was recorded digitally. And for anyone out there in radio land who'd like to listen to it, they can just go to finebaumfan.com, and it's listed.
Oh, is it there? I didn't realize it was there.
Yeah, it's on Finebaum Fan, along with me, stomping Jim into quitting a couple of different times. So they took up a lot of great clips to put on there.
I had no idea that clip was available.
Oh, yeah.
And by the way, since I've already vowed I won't say it anymore, what is your memory of that?
Was that he claimed that but for some injury he was as good or could have been better than Ted Williams, a better baseball player, a better hitter than Ted Williams. And very directly, very, very distinctly. I mean, I haven't listened to the call specifically in quite some time, but it's on there. Everyone can listen to it, and it's absolutely hilarious. And you're right, Paul. You
know what I have to say about you, Andy? You're just a stinking liar. I mean, you're making that up, aren't you?
Oh yes. It's another great Northern conspiracy, Paul. This evil Yankee, and beyond being a Yankee, a Buckeye, is calling down to this show, which I've got no business calling your show. I'm not allowed to call the SEC network and talk about something other than SEC teams. But yes, no, I computer generated all of it. I posted on the internet. I spread the rumors a few years before I began calling your show. I am truly an evil mastermind. It's like I'm the T-1000 sent back to the future. An evil cyborg sent to. Oh, wait a minute, that's Nick Saban. But yeah, Jim's got no sense of humor about himself. He's got no perspective. He's got nothing.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Bruce Feldman joining us. Of course, it's always good to catch up with Bruce. He's author of The Quarterback, the QB, The Making of Modern Quarterbacks. And Bruce joins us now. And Bruce, thanks for the time. It's always good to catch up. I know you were recently with Jim Harbaugh, and we certainly want to talk about your experience with him and what you saw and how you think it's going.
Paul, it was an interesting time visiting him. I covered him, a decent amount when he was at Stanford. Had some what I thought were pretty insightful exchanges from him at times. And, this was a very, I don't know if I would say it was more guarded Jim Harbaugh, but, he almost challenged every question that I would say. And I think one of the things that became pretty apparent is the notion of that Jim Harbaugh did something as opposed to, his staff at San Diego, his staff at Stanford, his staff with the Niners. He really tried to diminish his own role in that, which if you look at just how much he has been hailed as a savior by the Michigan community now, it's an interesting juxtaposition. And so I had an interesting day there with Jim. He was I don't know if I caught him on a weird day. You talk to enough people who worked with him or played for him, and they say, Jim is kind of one of these guys where depending on what day you get, you don't know which Jim Harbaugh you're getting.
Other than that, certainly he is quirky. That, having covered him. But how is he playing in Ann Arbor and around the Big Blue Nation?
I would ask you this. I would say when Nick Saban took over at Alabama.
Actually, not Big Blue. I don't mean to confuse Big Blue Nation with Kentucky, but I think the Michigan Nation.
Oh, yeah, no, I know. Considering what the environment was when Nick Saban came to Tuscaloosa, a decade or so ago, I think there's even probably bigger expectations because this guy is one of their own, and he is a guy that they've been waiting on for so long. And I think because of that, he's the guy. Look, Michigan was 8th in the Big Ten in rushing last year. That's the kind of thing, you know, they had one top 25 finish in the last 7 years. It's just been a lot of mediocrity. And Jim Harbaugh was a fast turnaround guy. People probably forget how awful Stanford football was before he got there. And then, you know, he went took dead aim at USC and Pete Carroll, which were on top of the college football world at that time, certainly dominating the Pac-10. And he went 3-1 against USC. And they were a 41-point underdog in his first year, and they beat the Trojans at USC. So now here's this guy who everyone says is the ultimate competitor. Well, look who's now the head coach of the arch rival, Urban Meyer. They just won a national title at Ohio State, and I think because of all that, you know, it's even more stuff piled on Jim Harbaugh's plate, and you know, it's interesting to see how he handles it because he's you know, quirky is a good word. I mean, he is a very curious guy. He has, you know, kind of curious methods. And I asked him a little bit about kind of I'd heard some of the 4-hour practices that they would have on the field at the expense of, you know, using whatever time they had would be almost all on the practice field as opposed to meeting time. And he kind of, you know, joked and said, oh, it's class on the grass. And, you know, he kind of downplayed, oh, it's nothing revolutionary. But you talk to other college football coaches around the country, they're like, I've never heard anybody doing that. Or people just usually don't do that. So, you know, it's a lot of different ways. I mean, he's gotten a lot of attention for the satellite camps, and he's not shy about stepping on people's toes. But I think ultimately, you know, he's got to rebuild the psyche of not just of a football program, but I think of a football community there that probably feels like, you know, they bought into Rich Rod. It didn't work out fast enough for him. Then Brady Hoke got them excited early. They went to a Sugar Bowl, and then just kind of fizzled out. I mean, ultimately, it's going to be interesting to see how he recruits. They got to you got to find a quarterback. And, you know, right now, Urban Meyer has the gap between him and even the gap between Urban Meyer as well as Mark Antonio at Michigan State. When your two arch rivals are, you know, legitimate top 10 programs and you're spinning your wheels, it makes it even look worse.
Bruce, in terms of what he's done in trying to interpret how it will affect or won't affect him in the future, certainly we know, and you saw it firsthand, you know, what he did with Pete Carroll, and that was an enormous challenge. We all know he's up against now either the best or the second or 1B in terms of in Urban Meyer. How long do you think it will take? Or with Jim Harbaugh, is that a silly question, knowing his success in the past?
You know, I don't think, I mean, they were real young last year. I still don't think they have enough difference makers. I think they'll be better. You know, you look, I mean, the example I would use is Minnesota, you know, which did have a good running back, but it's not like they had A-plus talent, you know, around them. Still, you know, wins 8 games as a fringe top 25 team. And I think because you can rack up some wins against the rest of the Big Ten. You know, I think it's the gap between having the athletes that Ohio State has, even the personnel that Michigan State has. I think that's the big challenge for them going forward. I mean, ultimately, you know, I don't think it's going to be like, hey, we got to get this thing squared out, then we got to work on this. I think he's trying to get everything rectified at the same time. You know, he's got to hope that one of these quarterbacks emerges. I mean, they took a graduate transfer from Iowa, Jake Rudock, who was a solid player. You know, it's not like this is a guy you think is a program changer, but he does have experience, and he probably would be the guy I think they would hope will emerge as the starter. And then some of the younger quarterbacks that they brought in, hopefully they can, for his sake, they can develop. But you don't look at the skill guys and go, wow, there's an Anthony Carter or there's a Desmond Howard here. I mean, they just don't have it. Whereas Ohio State, you know, Ezekiel Elliott is a Heisman guy, and they have speed and athletes all over the place. You know, Michigan doesn't have a John Bosa. They don't have a Von Bell. I mean, you know, the other thing is Ohio State under Urban Meyer is recruited nationally in Texas, in the Deep South, in Florida, really, really well. We got to see if Jim Harbaugh and his staff can do that.
Bruce Feldman on the program chatting about his recent experiences with Jim Harbaugh. And I mean, you were in Tuscaloosa recently. We talked to you about that. Now you've been here. I know that it's impossible to try to compare and contrast a program that has won 3 national championships since 2009 versus Michigan. But I am curious because there are so many comparisons to what Saban did in taking over years ago versus what Harbaugh is attempting to do now.
Well, I think what you will hear, and Nick Saban, I think, is is good about talking. He can expand on the details of the hows and whys and his process, and it's obviously been talked about a lot. Jim Harbaugh is a lot more, I don't know if guarded is the right way, but he's just kind of all over the map when it comes to that thing. But I think if you were to, ask Jim Harbaugh, if he were to be an NFL scout one day and pop down at an Alabama practice this spring and see the physicality that they have on both lines in the front seven, huge, Derrick Henry at running back. They just had a big-time fullback who's moved on to the NFL. I mean, the only thing that I think you would look at and go, man, that's everything I want. Maybe it's just the quarterback question mark. But I think you would look and go, man, they got like 13 big D linemen. Right now Michigan has a few of those guys. They don't have enough of them. And I think, I don't know if he would call that the blueprint, but I think that the template is pretty similar. I mean, Urban Meyer was a spread guy and did a lot of different stuff offensively. You can go back to Jim Harbaugh's comments when he first gets the University of San Diego job, his first head coaching job, and he talks to his mentor, Bo Schembechler, about it, and the first thing Bo Schembechler says is, Jimmy, are you going to have a fullback who's an ass kicker? And are you going to have a tight end who's, yeah, coach, we're going to have that. And then it's like, okay, that's orders in place. And I think those are the things that's the similar stuff that I think, Alabama took over and dominated college football with. Jim Harbaugh is going to aspire to do that, and we'll see if he can get it done. I think he's going to make it better, and he'll make it better fast. But I don't know how quickly he closes the gap to where Urban Meyer has Ohio State, because I think Urban Meyer actually took over, with more talent than what Jim Harbaugh is getting.
And on the Saban front, by this point, Saban was already racking up the players for the next recruiting class. I know Harbaugh came in late, and it wasn't that eye-opening. But are there signals? Are there signs that he is going to bring in those type of hauls?
I mean, I think you look at the personnel he got. I mean, look, he hit the jackpot on Andrew Luck out of Houston. I think to his credit, he really had put together a really good staff at Stanford. We'll see how well these guys recruit under, a little different circumstances at Michigan. But right now we haven't seen that yet. I mean, they were in on some good players. They didn't have a really big class numbers-wise. So I know they're offering a bunch of kids. And he's very visible, and he does have a track record he can sell. So, I think people are going to listen. I mean, one of the things in the story, and I know sometimes it rubs people the wrong way to go, okay, everyone's hanging on this guy's every word. But whether it's a satellite camp or even the Jameis Winston draft academy stuff or, him commenting on American Sniper, Jim Harbaugh has been in the news a lot. And it's not just, it's not just people in Ann Arbor who are paying attention. I mean, he's a interesting figure because he had success in a lot of places and because he is, quirky in how he does things.
Bruce Feldman visiting Jim Harbaugh and Saban and certainly getting a great take on what has been going on in college football, the author of the QB. Bruce, many thanks. Always good to visit.
My pleasure. Thanks, Paul. Take care.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
ESPN Radio.
With the action on the court, the diamond, or the gridiron.
Comes alive.
The NBA.
The San Antonio Spurs are the world champions.
Major League Baseball.
San Francisco Giants are the champions of the baseball world.
A new college football playoff.
College football playoff national champions, the Ohio State Buckeyes.
You're home for the best in sports play-by-play.
ESPN Radio.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Rich is up next. Hey, Rich.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for taking my call.
You bet.
Hey, man, a great interview. Bruce Feldman, he's the man. Yeah, he is. He's tremendous. Hey, and Harbaugh, that's great. That's exciting. I wish him a ton of success. It's great that he's back on Saturdays where he belongs. And I just hope the first guy he punches in the face is Andy in Ohio. Because he's going to punch somebody, right?
No doubt.
He alluded to that beating USC as a 41-point underdog. Do you know what he said to Carroll when they went to shake hands?
No.
After the game, he said, "What the bleep is your problem?" That's what he said to him.
That's funny.
Yeah, it is fun. No, he's great. Hey, Paul, real quick, Les Miles, the guy from ESPN New Orleans. How realistic, and I defend Les Miles, how realistic is it that they would let him go? I think the more probable outcome, depending on how it shakes out, as everyone's guessing about these quarterbacks, would be that he was asked to get rid of a few assistants, mainly the offensive coordinator. I don't think that's more probable.
I think it just depends. It entirely depends on what the season looks like. And, you have to look at the schedule and try to anticipate if it's a close call. I mean, if there's a big win in there somewhere, then certainly it's less likely. But if there's nothing to show, Rich, then what do you do?
Right. Well, there is one other part of that equation I was going to bring up, and correct me if I'm wrong, isn't LSU as an institution and university having some financial difficulties, almost to the point where they were talking about filing bankruptcy?
They are. There's no question that they are having issues, but I don't think that's going to be the overriding factor here. Let me ask you, though. You're a football fan.
Is it a good idea? Is it a good idea to pay a $20 million buyout to a football coach?
No, it's not. It's not.
Right.
But,
it is a business.
Let me just throw this schedule at you, and I'll give you the debatable games, and you tell me what's going to happen, and then this conversation becomes easier. At Mississippi State, Auburn at home.
Win.
You like them winning both those games?
Yes.
Then they're at Syracuse, which I would say they'll win. They're at South Carolina, Florida at home, at Alabama, Arkansas at home,
loss,
at Ole Miss, and A&M at home. It's not a bad schedule.
2, Alabama and Ole Miss.
Well, then it's a moot conversation then.
Right.
Yeah.
And they'll be in every game because, like you said, 1 through 85, they have as much talent as anybody in the conference. It's just the one position. And isn't it ironic that he cannot, for the life of him, get a quarterback? Even when he was winning, and he won the national championship, who was it Malk? No, not Malk. Who was his quarterback? He was a game manager.
Was it Flynn? Was it Matt Flynn?
Matt Flynn, yeah, Matt Flynn. It's just interesting that how he can't seem to get a quarterback there. He can get everything else, as Sunday's loaded with all those players at every other position, but they just can't seem to get a quarterback. Not since, I guess, Russell, really. Right? I mean, Jordan Jefferson and well, I guess they got Mettenberger, but that was just for 1 year, right?
I believe he only had one significant year there, yes.
Yeah. So anyway, all right. Well, I just can't wait for the season because I can't listen to everybody talking about Les Miles getting fired in May. It's just I just can't take it anymore. Thanks for taking my call, buddy.
Thank you.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Andy Staples joins us from Sports Illustrated. A lot of news over the last couple of days, and Andy's been all over it concerning the Big 12, and are they going to enter a new era or stay the same? Andy, thanks for the time, as always. I know you've been all over this Big 12 conversation. How did it end up?
Well, they decided on a tiebreaker, and it's a pretty interesting one. The folks who hated when the BCS took margin of victory out of the equation are going to love it because, first and foremost, so if there was a tie like last year, when you've got two teams sitting at the top with one loss, they're going to use the head-to-head. If you've got two teams tied, the winner of the head-to-head is the champ. So in the case of last year, Baylor's the champ. Now, as you go down, it's pretty similar to what the SEC uses for its divisional tiebreakers, where record against the next best team, that sort of thing. If you get to a point where everything's tied up, locked up, and you can't fix anything, for example, 2008 in the Big 12 South, where you had Texas, Oklahoma, and Texas Tech all with one loss, then they're going to use margin of victory, combined margin of victory, or I guess point differential would be the better term, where they add up how much you won by in your games against the two other teams and how much you lost by in the games against the two other teams. They will lop off the number 3 team from that and then use the head-to-head. So if we went back to 2008, it'd be a very different result. Texas would have wound up winning the Big 12 South using this tiebreaker because Texas Tech lost by so much to Oklahoma, and Texas only lost a little to Texas Tech by a little bit.
Okay, so that's one end. Let me ask you in terms of the conference championship. They decided not to do that. Why?
Mm-hmm. Well, right now they can't. They need that championship game rule to be deregulated. Because right now, the NCAA rule says you got to have 12 teams split into two divisions, at least 12 teams split into two divisions. That rule is going to get deregulated. Nobody seems to be all fired up about keeping it. So the ACC wants to potentially go divisionless. The Big 12 would like the opportunity to save the championship game if it wants to. Right now, it doesn't want to, and I'm okay with that decision to not push for a championship game, even if they can do one, because basically they would be instituting a championship game based on what happened last year. Because last year's the only year we've had where you had a playoff selection committee and people were deciding it this way. Those BCS years, they don't really count because, as we saw last year, the selection committee doesn't behave the way the poll voters behave. So we don't know how it's going to be from year to year. They need a little more data before they can figure out whether they need to have a championship game. Because let's be honest, Paul, if Georgia Tech makes a couple of stops in the ACC championship game last year, the Big 12 gets the team into the playoff. And then if Ohio State wins by 7 instead of winning by 59, the Big 12 might have had 2 teams in the playoff.
Other than that, seems like a pretty quiet Big 12 meeting, would you say?
No, it has been pretty quiet. We just talked to Bob Bowlesby, the commissioner, and I asked him if they talked about satellite camps in the meeting with the football coaches, and he said, no, we didn't really want to start a fist fight today. So it's as hot and heavy an issue in this league as it is in the SEC as well. In the Big 12 case, the Texas schools don't want schools from outside Texas to be able to come in and do a camp with, say, University of Incarnate Word or somebody like that. Oklahoma State's been doing camps at Mary Hard Baylor for the last few years. And so it's very similar to the situation where the SEC schools are mad about the Big Ten guys coming down and doing camps with Georgia State or Stetson just to get into that area.
Let's get on the field, and certainly, as you know, you're at the epicenter of all this. TCU getting much love in the preseason prognostications. What about you?
I like them. I mean, they bring back almost everybody on offense. And let's remember where they were sitting last year. At this point last year, they were pretty sure Trevon Boykin was their quarterback, but they weren't entirely sure it was going to be him or Matt Jokel. They're switching to a new offense. You don't know how that's going to go. Now, that offense is going to be even better this year because they bring back almost everyone. Defensively, they do lose some really good players, Sam Carter, Paul Dawson, but it's a Gary Patterson defense. It's going to be pretty good. So I think you have to probably put them as a favorite because they do get Baylor at home. Baylor brings back almost everybody except for Bryce Petty, the quarterback, plus they've got a 405-pound tight end. So I think that's going to be a fun race in the Big 12 next year because you've got those two teams. If Oklahoma gets better with Lincoln Riley running the offense, they could be involved. I think Texas is going to beat some people that maybe nobody's expecting him to beat because I saw what Charlie Strong did at Louisville when he had a chance to get some of his own guys in there and really develop some of the defensive players that he had that he inherited. Louisville was much better. I think with Texas it would be the same situation. They'll just keep getting better the more of his own players he gets in.
And what would a good record be? What is good for Texas right now, Andy?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think if they win 8 or 9 games, they should be very happy. They still need work. They still need to figure out the quarterback situation, and especially in today's game, the quarterback is the most important piece of the puzzle. And right now, they're not in a situation where they are comfortable with what they have. Neither Tyrone Swoops nor Gerard Hurd really separated during the spring, and I don't think they would have told us even if they had because they want to make sure both those guys are sticking around. But, Swoops is a more methodical. He's going to do exactly what you tell him. Hurd is a more freewheeling, has some improvisational skills, but maybe isn't going to follow the plan as thoroughly. And so you have to kind of pick your poison there, and they don't feel like they've got the perfect guy yet, and they'll have Kai Loxley coming as a freshman. And I asked Charlie Strong a couple weeks ago, is Kai, he playing a redshirt, and he said he's got to be ready to play because we just don't know what it's going to look like week run this new offense on the field.
Andy, switching over to the SEC, the 8-9 debate, the 8-9 conference games has been going on this week. The SEC just seems pretty well entrenched on 8. I realize we have spring meetings coming up here in 2.5 to 3 weeks. I doubt it's going to be the number one topic of conversation, but what will it take for the SEC to move on that subject?
I think getting left out of the playoff and being told explicitly is because of a strength of schedule issue. Because I don't think there's going to be any change. Because I can guarantee you that South Carolina, which plays Clemson every year in the out-of-conference, and Florida, which plays Florida State every year in the out-of-conference, are not going to want 9 conference games. They want that scheduling flexibility. The question is it going to hurt them in the long run? Because you will have the Big Ten is going to move to 9. The Pac-12 already plays 9. The Big 12 already plays 9. And, if it becomes a situation where they say, well, hey, you could have not scheduled Western Carolina, Florida Atlantic, and Florida International along with one decent out-of-conference team, well, then you might have to make a change. But I think now the SEC schools have the flexibility to avoid that situation. They can schedule good teams. I mean, look at Georgia. They schedule a Clemson or somebody like that along with playing Georgia Tech every year. It can be done. It's just, they have to want to do it.
Andy Staples, live in the middle of the action. I have a feeling this won't be the last time you're at a spring meeting.
No, got ACC next week and SEC in a couple weeks, and I will be stalking a hotel lobby near you.
Can't wait to see you. Thanks, Andy.
All right, thanks, Paul.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Andy is in Atlanta. Andy, thanks for the phone call.
Hey, Paul, before you were a big radio and TV star, you had a long print journalism career, and I have a question. Back in those days, tell me how the process worked. When you would submit something to be published, I mean, it got scrutinized. There was an editor. There was people that looked it over to make sure it wasn't sloppy and made sense, right?
Sure. I mean, when things were really going well, I mean, you turn in an article, it goes to your probably your immediate editor, then it goes to a copy desk, and depending on the importance of the article, it would go up the food chain. A lot of my articles were not only read by the editor, they were read by legal counsel, and it would be vetted. And depending on where you worked, I mean, if you worked at a New York Times or a major magazine, then you'd have fact checkers call and double check. I mean, but yeah, that was then. I think I know where you're going here.
Yeah. So walk me through the world of online sports reporting today. Which, just AL.com, the articles that are on there are just garbage. They're so sloppy. There's punctuation errors. There's sentences that don't make sense. There's repeated words. It is like they're blogging. They're not being journalists.
Well, the most important thing today, the most important thing that matters in online journalism, which is what has pretty much taken over the world, like it or not, is how many people see it. So there's also you're trying to get it on out as quickly as possible, and social networking has changed everything because instead of checking a story out, most people just tweet it, and I can promise you that when you put something out that quickly, it has a reasonably good chance of being wrong.
But it's also just a terrible reflection on whoever they represent.
Yeah.
And I'm fascinated that there's obviously not one person has reviewed it. It just went out.
I don't want to say this because I still have a lot of friends in journalism, but essentially journalism is dead. And I don't like saying that, but I am saying it because one thing I believe in, and you know this, Andy, is I believe in telling the truth. And, I mean, there are those who want to act like they still practice serious journalism. I'm not talking – I mean, there are journalistic entities at every at the network I work at, and they're very good. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what you're talking about. Print journalism, for the most part, is long gone.
Yes, it's a race to the bottom is the way it looks to me.
Well, it's all about. I won't out this person, but a couple of years ago, someone wrote a story about me that went online, and he called me back. I ran into him. Either called me the next week or I ran into him. I can't remember. And He said, man, I got a lot of hits. And I'm like going, what? But and that's what it's all about now. Does it get traction? Does it get picked up? Is it regurgitated? And if it's not, then you failed, regardless of the quality of what the person wrote.
Hey, Paul, one other thing. I'm reading Rammer, Jammer, Yellowhammer. There's multiple hilarious anecdotes in there that involve you. And did you really meet the author at a football game in Tuscaloosa and were so vilified by Alabama fans back in those days that you had to buy an Alabama hat off the street to put on as a disguise because you were getting worried about your own safety?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Rammer, Jammer, Yellowhammer, and I recommend that to anyone, even though the book depicted the 1999 Alabama football season, it could be any campus, and it could be today. It's that good a book. Warren St. John, former New York Times reporter, wrote the book, and what he did, to make a very long story short, it's hard to make this short, but he picked about 4 or 5 people to spend the season with, a couple of ticket brokers, a couple of people that traveled to games in motorhomes, and I was his pick as a journalist or sports writer or sports talk show host, whatever you want. And we had several interludes, and that season, I mean, I had death threats. Alabama fans despised me. I did. That was the Alabama-Tennessee game. I mean, I was getting harassed so badly. I just put the hat on, and people, when you're wearing an Alabama hat, people do not bother you in Tuscaloosa. My favorite story in that book, Andy, I don't know if you're done with it yet, but after the SEC championship game, I was working for a local television station in Birmingham at the time, and that the television satellite truck stopped, I think, in Douglasville, Georgia, at a McDonald's or something, and they thought I was in the truck, and fans late at night started rocking the thing, trying to turn it over, thinking I was in there.
It's unreal. You know, people call you such an Alabama homer over the last, 6, 7, 8 years. They don't know how it was back then. I mean,
No.
You were persona non grata at that time.
No, there's no question, and that was '99. I mean, it really lasted until Nick Saban arrived in 2007.
And the interview with the coach's wife during the middle of the scandal, and you somehow got in to see her.
Yeah, it's a long story, but I was able to get in to see her. It was Mike DuBose was accused of having an affair, which it turned out that he was, although he stood up and lied about it. And I happened to work at the time with his wife's brother-in-law, and I was able to go down to see her, and she, of course, stood by her man and said that he was a good and decent person that would never mislead or lie or run around or cheat on her. It turned out that he was doing all of those things.
I mean, for an Alabama-centric radio program, did it ever get any better or more salacious than that year?
Yeah, there was only one day better than that, Andy. And that was an amazing story. It lasted for a couple of months, and everyone defended him. And then it came out that he actually was having the affair with his secretary, and they let him stay, expecting to fire him as soon as he lost a couple of games. It turned out that he beat Steve Spurrier twice that year, won the SEC championship, and they gave him a contract extension. But there was only one day more dramatic than that, and that was in 2003 when it came out that the coach, which had been hired 4 months earlier, was in a hotel room in Pensacola, Florida, with 2 strippers. And he was immediately fired. That was probably the most dramatic week I have ever been associated with on this show.
So wait, if you're named the head coach of Alabama football, and you, after being warned multiple times, you have 2 hookers up in your hotel room running up a $300 room service tab while you're playing golf with everybody, that could end your career?
Well, he denied it, and it turned out that Sports Illustrated may have overdone the story because they had a major settlement with him that went on forever. But one thing's for sure, the university was pretty sure that he needed to go, and he went.
Good stuff.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Squirrel is up next in Mississippi. Hey, Squirrel.
Hey, thanks for taking my call, Paul. Hey, I was in Oxford yesterday, and there's a big buzz around town, man. They're excited about this weekend.
Well, I can't wait to get there. It has been a while, and I have really been looking forward to coming back.
You rolling in Friday night? You coming in Saturday morning? What's the game plan?
I'm going to be there early. I actually am speaking Friday at the law school at they have a sports law symposium going on, and I'm speaking there on Friday. So I'll be there I'll be there all day.
Well, I hope you have a good trip to Mississippi. Hey, I heard our boy Jim call in earlier and quit the show, and I heard you say that you're not his daddy. Are you putting him up for adoption or something like that?
Well, I mean, listen, you understand parenting, and I mean, there's only so much you can do, and I mean, I'm thinking about suing him for just abuse because the more I do for him, the less appreciative he is.
Oh no, he appreciates everything. Now we talked earlier, and we set the over and under for him quitting at 15 for the year or something like that nature. He's on track to hit that 15 number.
Yeah, I know. He went away for a month, and then he came back, and I thought he was back for good.
Well, what's today, Wednesday? He'll be back by Friday. Aloha.
Thank you for listening to the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast. Tune into the Paul Finebaum Show every day from 3 to 7 Eastern on the SEC Network or on the ESPN Radio app.